Welcome to Blaze News, The Mandate, Day 13. I'm Jill Savage. Tonight on the agenda, this whole week we've been uncovering more and more of the USAID scandal and discovering just where our tax dollars have been going. President Trump ordered another federal agency, the General Services Administration, to discontinue all of its paid media contracts for Politico, BBC, and Bloomberg. Time magazine tried to infer that Elon Musk is the real president on its latest cover. Trump had this to say in response.
Is Time magazine still in business? I didn't even know that. Elon is doing a great job. He's finding tremendous fraud and corruption and waste. You see it with the USAID, but you're going to see it even more so with other agencies.
Trump also fired Ellen Weintraub. She's a Democrat commissioner and the chair of the Federal Election Commission, and she's been a vocal critic of Donald Trump, and she's now suggesting that she won't leave her post, claiming that Trump's method of firing her is illegal. Last night, the Senate confirmed Russell Vought to serve as the Director of Office of Management and Budget, despite Elizabeth Warren's best effort to stall the vote.
Ms. Warren. Pursuant to Rule 12, no debate is permitted during a vote. The senator will suspend.
Won all support of the 53 Senate Republicans, and all the Democrat and independent senators voted against him. And Donald Trump announced on Truth Social his plans to sign an executive order to end Biden's paper straw mandate, writing, "They don't work, and we have to go back to plastic." I don't know if I've been more excited about any of the executive orders that we've had so far. Now let's bring in Blaze News Editor-in-Chief Matthew Peterson. So, MP, there's so many different things to choose from every single day in the news. But, you know, Trump was out there. We saw him praising Elon Musk for finding all of the waste. And he said it's just the start, right? We're going to be close to balancing a budget, Trump added. I hear this and I wonder, oh my gosh, those words, is that even possible after all this time?
Yeah, I mean, this is an incredible time and incredible things are happening. And here's the kind of energy that Musk brings to this is really important. And, you know, there's obviously, if you're a White House staffer, you know, you're wondering, like, how do I fit in with Elon, et cetera. You have the media out there saying, trying to cause division, which is really what that Time cover was all about. And you can see, on the contrary, as Elon Musk tweeted today, I love real Donald Trump as much as it's possible for a straight man to love another man, right? So they're not breaking. You know, they're gonna stay strong. And I think it's more the political and cultural energy just as much as, you know, the smarts and the Doge team that is going to help reorient and keep the focus on something like a balanced budget, which, you know, I mean, it's not a joke. People are just sick of it because they hear people talk about it for years and it never happens. They don't really pass budgets. But here again, you see political will is key. The will to actually do the thing and try to get the thing done.
Yeah, and today we saw a lot of people just really excited on X when they were covering up, you know, the name of the USAID on a big street sign, taking some of the letters off of the building. Mm-hmm. And then yet you have people that are like this woman here, Ellen Weintraub, who was saying, oh, no, President Trump, he can't fire me, right? It's the justification of I am who do you know who I am? You can't just come in and fire me. Yet the political will of Donald Trump is not something that I would necessarily be trying to go against, especially this week.
These people don't know how to handle it. And thankfully we'll have Chris Bedford later on the show to talk to us about what's going on with the D.C. tribe. But these are the wealthiest, you know, suburbs in America, the wealthiest counties in America, all centered around Washington, D.C. And these people are either terrified or in denial, like she is, trying to say, you know, they don't know how to deal with this because usually things don't happen. Nothing ever happens. The nothing ever happens guy is right about Washington, D.C. This time they're realizing something's different. And how do they respond to that? And it's either get out in the streets and sort of LARP as a protester or get the hell out of town.
Well, don't go anywhere. You mentioned Chris Bedford. He is going to come up next. He has an exclusive interview breaking down the Trump revolution. Stay tuned. Did you know that 85% of the grass-fed beef in stores is actually imported? That's thanks to a 2015 law change. All this foreign meat now can be labeled product of the United States just because it's packaged here. That means that grocery store meat is often full of antibiotics, hormones, and even seed oils. Good Ranchers is different. They're 100% American meat. They have no hidden additives, no seed oils, just high-quality protein. Their beef, chicken, and seafood are all born, raised, and harvested right here in the United States, so you know exactly where your food comes from. And their seed oil-free chicken nuggets are officially back. They're made with whole cuts of chicken. They're gluten-free, allergen-safe, and packed with clean, delicious flavor that you can feel good about serving. And you can subscribe to a box full of nuggets or get them as an add-on to any order. And the best part, the Good Ranchers, they deliver straight to your door. So you can skip the grocery store lines and get that farm-to-table quality while supporting American ranchers. Right now, with their New Year, New Meat promo, you can get free ground beef, chicken breast, or wild-caught salmon in your order for a year, plus $25 off with code Jill at checkout. Don't wait. Go order now. Good Ranchers, American meat delivered. Blaze senior politics editor Chris Bedford recently sat down with David Azerrad. He's an author and an assistant professor and a research fellow at Hillsdale College. They discuss how Trump's presidency could be another American revolution. Watch.
I'm here with David Azerrad, professor at Van Andel Graduate School of Government from Hillsdale College here in Washington, D.C., and an expert on progressive history, a frequent interview guest on past programs. Thank you for joining me, David.
Thanks for having me, Chris. Good to see you.
It's great to be seen. You know, I got news to you. This has been a white pill couple of weeks. Things that people never thought were going to happen have started to happen. Now, it's just the beginning. But it reminded me, and I wanted to talk to you today, because it reminded me of a quote that you gave to me in the Federalist Radio Hour many years ago when I was saying, what's going to change? How is anything ever going to be any different? The Republicans have no appetite for attacking the deep state, the federal government actually reining it in. And you responded, well, we've only just begun to fight. So we have to see what actually happens and how that responds. Where do you see this movement that we've seen from the executive and outside the executive over these last 2 weeks? And are you optimistic now? Is this the fight that you were hoping for, or is there just so much more to go?
Oh, there's so much more to go. But so I am thrilled with the first 2 weeks. I mean, it's like seeing this giant who's been sitting in bed being a potato for years finally decide to flex a few muscles. Like the was it Venezuela or Colombia? I've already forgotten. Colombia. Or Mexico. She sent 10,000 troops the next day. Like, why have we never done that before? We're the U.S. I mean, I could understand if we were Bhutan or Sri Lanka. There isn't much we can do, right? We're small, crappy countries. But to quote the president, or to adapt a line from the president, we are not a shithole country. And yet we kind of have been behaving like one. You know, restraint, not promoting our interest aggressively and with self-confidence. So it's just amazing to see a Republican occupant in the White House, roar, but he did that the first time around. The difference too now is with the plan. Like they clearly learned from the first term, right? And in their defense, they had no experience. It's not like DC had a bench that was ready to staff an America First populist nationalist administration. DC was preparing for, warmed over Reaganism or warmed over Bushism. This time around, there's not just the appetite, there's a plan. So it's been amazing to watch. To me, the question is, can you institutionalize it? What's the line? Live by the pen, die by the pen, right? Every executive order can get repealed. And then basically, I would want the Trump administration to burn some political capital, even if it means they lose both houses in the midterms, but to enact major legislative changes. I think that has to be the goal, so that when the presidency is over, you don't just have a bunch of executive actions or funds that have been impounded. You have 1, 2, 3 pieces of transformational legislation. Something on par with the 64 Civil Rights Act or the 65 Immigration Act, meaning pieces of legislation that fundamentally altered the United States of America. So I love the executive actions, the pronouncements, the threat of tariffs, but I hope they have an agenda to use the next 2 years in Congress to, even if it costs you the majorities, it doesn't matter. Ram it through. What Obama did with Obamacare, do it for something that's America first.
Now, the difficulty they have there is right now, I mean, I was just meeting with Capitol Hill staffers earlier today. They can't ratify their own tax cuts. They can't figure out if they're going to cut $1 trillion or $500 billion. They can't agree on what they're going to spend. And so far, they haven't spent the money to actually help with the deportations the American people roundly support, and which we now have video camera footage of this for weeks, and the American people's opinion still hasn't changed on this. It doesn't seem like there's much they can count on the legislature for when they've only got a few months left to even fund the things that they were nationally popularly elected for. That seems to be a holding pattern, but they can they're starting to alter Washington, it seems, to the point that I wouldn't be surprised if housing prices are affected in D.C. for the first time in my lifetime in the next year or two, as all these employees start to leave, as people who've spent years and years here start to leave. What is there to be said for just the cultural shift of they've proven that the big loudmouth at the bar can actually be knocked down, that things can be changed, and that there is hope, and that maybe a lot of this liberal experiment is kind of fake?
So look, I want to make something clear. I've never been a black-pilled guy. I've never been the...
I know, that's why I wanted to talk to you. You've always had a glimmer of hope.
Yeah, and I have more hope now than I've ever had. However, I feel that since the mood now is so exuberant on our side, I feel the need to remind people that we haven't won. Wokeness is not dead. Civil rights law is pretty much where it is. The universities, which are the nerve center of the regime, of its ideology, are exactly where they were. So there's still a lot we need to do. So, his problem is he did a semi-hostile takeover of the Republican Party. So
completely.
I say semi because on the one hand, the voters like him, but the establishment, right now, I think they're afraid of his popularity, but they're still not fully ideologically aligned in the way that when Obama took power in 2008, he had a Democratic Party, I think maybe with the exception of Iran, that was largely aligned with him on healthcare reform, on gay marriage, on all the stuff he did. Whereas Trump still does not have a Republican Party, much less, I should add, a conservative movement that is aligned with him fully on what he's trying to do. So it's going to take some time. But the other thing to keep in mind is the left right now is still, I think, reeling from a series of uppercuts to the face. And they're not protesting, there are no riots. The lawsuits and the injunctions have barely started, but they're going to come back, meaning they're not dead. I think right now they still can't fully understand what happens. I am very encouraged by the fact that they're doubling down on all of the lunacy.
Yeah, they are.
That is wonderful to see. Like, learn nothing so that we can shellac them harder. Now, eventually, victory will need to mean dragging the left to the right. Basically doing to them what they've been doing to us for the past several decades. That's how you know you've won on an issue, is when you are compelling your opponent to argue on your terms or to moderate his positions. We're not there yet. So look, all of this is amazing. I want to see more of it, but it would be a colossal mistake to preemptively declare victory, as some people have been doing on the internet, like saying wokeness is dead. Wokeness is not dead. The civil rights regime is still there, the universities are still there, and they're going to evade as much as they can, in the same way that many universities have not been complying with the ruling against affirmative action. So now you're banning DEI. What are they going to do? They're going to rename it, academic excellence and innovation. So we need to have a lot of fight in us and not do the preemptive victory lap, even though Trump may want to do so for political reasons. And, let him do so, say we've won, but we got a lot of fighting to do.
What steps need to be taken on the college campuses? You've taught at multiple campuses, University of Dallas, Hillsdale, American University.
Yes.
My gosh, that place.
Isn't that your alma mater?
It is my alma mater.
Not much to be proud of, I should say.
They don't call me anymore for donations, I'll tell you that. They stopped years ago going. And I don't think you'll see my picture on their wall in the journalism school ever. But what kind of steps can the federal government take? Is it just to hit their funding?
Yeah, so I mean, but again, this is going to require Congress. But it seems to me the two big things you'd want to do are one, deal with the funding. So look, the basic setup in America today is at the age of 18, when I know legally you get to vote and to go die for your country. But let's be honest, you're not a real 18-year-old the way your grandparents were real 18-year-olds. You get access to hundreds of thousands of dollars of loans with no collateral. It's not like you're buying a house or a factory. The collateral is go to college. You may or may not obtain a diploma, and if you do, there's a high likelihood that it's worthless because you learned very little. There's rampant grade inflation. If you don't finish, who keeps all the money? The colleges. So you get spat out, right? The America's 6-year graduation rate, I think, is about 60%. So these
That's
kids
wild.
they don't even get diplomas.
I couldn't wait to get out of college. Never go back.
Well,
I know that you go there every day. You're a professor, but I was less good at class.
well, you went to AU. I teach at Hillsdale. So I think had you gone into Hillsdale, you might have had a different experience.
I think I would have.
So they get spat out. Is that how you say it? Spat out?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. After a few years, they're heavily indebted. They've learned nothing. Who has no skin in the game? The universities. So something has to be done about the way we fund higher ed, which is we're taking money to subsidize the universities. Second is we got to do something about accreditation. Some people have thought about this more deeply. My friend Scott Yainer, who teaches at Boise State and works for the Claremont Institute, has done some very good work on this. But basically right now, it's practically impossible to lose your accreditation. And accreditation matters because it determines whether or not the federal funds can go to that institution. We would need much tighter accreditation mechanisms. So we should put universities out of business. We should be closing down departments. We need to go to war with the universities and the kind of incremental reforms that have been happening for the past 70 years, right? Conservatives have been complaining about universities since Buckley wrote God and Man at Yale, I think in 1950. And what do we have to show for it? A few centers, a few lecture series. It only gets worse. There has to be a much more aggressive approach to higher ed reform. And that, I think, is key in the long term because the universities are the seminaries of the regime. They are the nerve center, meaning who works in the corporate sector, in government, in NGOs, in media? People who went to college. We need to do something about that.
That accreditation system that they've built up, the awards they give each other, the fellowships they give each other, the degrees they give each other, seems to power the entire thing. And we've learned from these last couple of weeks, you actually can just push a lot of it over. That a lot of it actually doesn't have the same kind of resistance that you'd expect. What do you see any kind of a hope that Congress actually latches onto this? I mean, I've been asking congressmen and senators for years now when they say things like, what do we do at some breakfast? Or and say, hey, why are you still sending money to your enemies?
Yeah.
And they look at me blankly. I don't think they even know what it's included in. They don't even remember when they voted for it. Because, nothing passes in D.C. Here's the bill that funds Harvard. Here's the bill that funds Columbia.
No, it's
part of some massive omnibus.
Yeah. So, look, I don't understand. I've never worked in Congress, and I don't fully understand it.
It's like the priesthood or the military. You kind of have to do it in order to understand it.
So my understanding is, why don't they do individual appropriations? Because they don't want to work that much.
It's hard.
So they want to come in on Tuesdays, leave on Thursdays, and do 12 mega appropriation bills all rolled up into one. And the choices are always shut down the whole government or fund all the abominations. Why not disaggregate it more so that you can defund parts of it and not shut down the government? I mean, how do you get them to do that? I mean, Trump's the leverage he has right now is his enormous popularity and the fact that he's a master at public humiliation of his opponents and that they are afraid of him. But how he's going to get that done? I mean, honestly, that's above my pay grade. I don't know, but I mean, I would hope that people in DC are capable of offering some advice, but we need to get some big things through Congress that the next president can't just undo with the stroke of a pen.
And the Congress has changed. The Senate is still the last holdout. But even the Senate, 40% of senators that are sitting there right now were elected, entered office just a few weeks before Donald Trump or after Donald Trump had been president. So this is and with the House of Representatives, it's more like 60% are post-Trump people, and that number goes higher every year. You've studied conservative thought and the history of it. When Barry Goldwater was did a hostile takeover of the GOP, the ideas were moved a little bit. People were activated. A young Ronald Reagan was activated in some way to become a political figure with his time for choosing speech, and then later run for governor. When Reagan did a hostile takeover, and it was hostile because all of his allies were knifed by the H.W. Bush people the day of the inauguration when he took over, all these people did shift conservative thought and Republican thinking. Donald Trump's first administration was barely recognizable. I mean, he was immediately under the gun. People still trusted the FBI. Yeah. When James Comey came around and said, we have a real issue here, people took it seriously and said, all right, well, you've got chips, you've got credit, you've got social credit here. Now that doesn't exist, and Trump's extremely popular. Is the history of conservative thought so that actual strong and successful leaders who are popular are able to shift the way that people think in the broader movement and in the future?
I mean, Americans like winners. I mean, I have some misgivings about the Goldwater mythology. That part of me wonders if he had not been shellacked so badly, whether the Great Society would not have been more moderate and LBJ would have had slimmer margins to get things done. But that's a separate matter. But the Reagan, part of what made him influential is that he was popular and was good at what he did. And so if Trump has a really successful first term, and then, I guess Vance is next in line for the throne, and maybe has one or two more terms, the nadering nabobs of neoconservatism and of libertarianism and of fusionism, the Bill Kristols of the world will be even more marginalized than they are. I mean, they're already pretty marginalized.
They just got defunded.
Yeah.
Because USAID was just a neocon bribery project.
So the young people will continue to flock to these new ideas, and the conservative movement will have to continue to play catch up. But again, there's a lot of work to be done, meaning, there's a lot of boomer money that is ensconced in conservative organizations that, most of them are still pretty anti-Trump, and a handful of them say they like the president, but their policy agenda remains largely, the same
Bush
fusionist, Bush era, what Rusty Reno called the rotting flesh of Reaganism. So you don't see a lot, one example, our friend Russ Vought, what he built up at the Center for Renewing America, that's a good example of a think tank, a conservative organization that is ideologically and policy aligned with the president, i.e. that will even outlast Trump in terms of the policies they're putting forward. We need more of that.
Speaking of young people, Hillsdale is definitely different from other college campuses. When I got to teach a course at Hillsdale, it was like going to what I'd always imagined the ideal college was, but it's not the experience I had at American University.
What did you teach?
Taught a future of journalism and kind of an introduction to the career.
Oh, nice.
As a Pulliam fellow out there, it was wonderful. But even then, even when you talk to Hillsdale students, even not too long ago, a lot of them still had a kind of a Reagan idea of what the GOP was, kind of just very traditional. They certainly weren't sitting there talking about, well, how do we use power to enact conservative things? They certainly weren't talking about things that you've talked about, like the danger and the fundamental changes to our laws brought up by the civil rights legislation in the 60s. Have you seen that start to change, or are people still in kind of that old school mindset?
No, it's changing. I mean, you see it, to quote one of my favorite movies, with all the Utes, you see a lot of change on all the issues. I mean, the internet has been great. Look, I'll maybe say this in defense of the conservative movement, to maybe not be too dismissive of my elders. Maybe things needed to get much worse before they got better. Maybe we needed the insanity of COVID, BLM, the Great Awakening.
It'll be a good thing for this country.
Maybe the reason Reagan didn't undo the LBJ executive order on affirmative action in government contracting and hiring is because Americans still had enough goodwill vis-a-vis African Americans for racial preferences and kind of a sense of, Jim Crow is really bad and we should do something. Maybe it was necessary to go through this to finally get to a point where the right says, basta, as the Spaniards say, enough, we're done. I see it with, I remember some of the people who were getting canceled in 2015, 2016 in conservative organizations in the Trump administration. I am fairly confident they would not get canceled today for the similar, old tweets that are being dug up. The right has, firmed up its spine. And so, maybe it was necessary for it to get that bad for things to get better. That's maybe the only excuse I can make on behalf of the previous generations that maybe I think should have done more.
The deep state revealed itself. In 2017, people called you a conspiracy theorist for talking about it.
Correct.
Now they're holding rallies to defend it. Professor Azerrad, thank you for joining.
Thank you for having me, Chris.
Chris Bedford will deliver a eulogy for the D.C. swamp economy. Stay tuned. How is President Trump's agenda being received in the suburbs of Washington, D.C.? Well, not well, according to Chris Bedford, as he wrote in his Beltway brief today. He joins us now to break it all down. So, Bedford, what's going on right now in D.C. as Trump's agenda is trying to get out there and take effect?
It's been incredible panic. It's something that you hear at school pickup. It's something you hear at sports practice. It's something you hear really anywhere you congregate with middle-aged adults all around Washington, D.C. At first, it was all about childcare. Where am I going to put my kid? Who's going to stay home and play with my kids all day now that I actually have to show up at my six-figure job? This is insane. Who's going to allow this? These are actually like normal concerns for someone who's had a change in their schedule, but it's difficult to sympathize with you necessarily when the sense of entitlement to work like we do every day, like the rest of the country does every day, to make this six-figure salary, it's just kind of wild. And there's also a funny tinge to it, too, because they keep on talking about how this person who wasn't elected, Elon Musk, could possibly tell them what to do. When I have so far, to my wife's happiness, resisted the urge to ask any of these government workers to see their election certificate. Who exactly elected them to be in charge of Americans' lives? This is a new twist for us. But now it's also turning into kind of a panic because there's a lot of worry around town that maybe this is a fake offer. Maybe if I retire and I get 8 months of my salary and I get to try to figure out my life, what if they just revoke that? Now, I don't think that's going to happen. It's at the end of the day, it is the faith and trust of the federal government backed up by Democratic Party, which may come back into power in the midterms and parts of the Congress, who it's very important to them to be able to make sure that these payments go out. But this is not simply like a mechanic shop shutting down on one side of town and the mechanics have to figure out a job at another garage somewhere else. This is an industry. DC is insulated in a bubble. Even in the 2008 housing crisis, we barely took a dent. Prices have gone up and up and up. And that's because the government always pays its bills, like a bunch of Lannisters here in King's Landing. And at the same time, the government continues to grow. So there's a lot of people, 2 salaries, sometimes more if they're making money on the side, making six-figure jobs, inflating this around Washington, D.C., and they've developed skill sets and talents and connections which do not serve them in the broader world. Their options are often federal government or the vast network of nonprofits and non-governmental organizations or NGOs that exist around Washington, D.C., and the contractors that serve them make hundreds of millions of dollars doing so. If you cut off the money to those NGOs and nonprofits, and you cut off the employment at a lot of these agencies, there's not really a lot of options. And Joe Biden tried to do a bunch of things about this. Some of it was messed up by the courts. A lot of these people have student loans. To buy a 1970s, we've talked about this in the show, I'm complaining about it all week. To buy a 1970s 3-bedroom ranch with 3 bathrooms, half an hour outside of D.C., costs like $1 million in an ugly neighborhood of Arlington. It's kind of psychotic. This fake economy is propped up by all of these paying jobs that are here in the district. You start to change that. Houses start to sell. people need to sell. They need to move. They need to go to a place that they can afford better. They need to search for jobs. They're no longer here in the district. The pricing, the market starts to drop. The housing market's decided by what your neighbors sell for. And if one of your neighbors or two of your neighbors has to have a fire sale, then everyone's value goes down because that place is sold for $800,000. It's not worth $1 million anymore. This is going to have a ripple effect. Even though the courts are working to try and change this, if this lasts a year, 2 years, this DC economy and the machine that's grown up around it, this not shining city on a hill, but an oiled machine in the swamp, will start to have serious cultural changes that cannot simply be fixed with the stroke of a pen by a future Democratic president in somewhere between 4 and 15 years. This is going to be this is a real culture change in Washington, and you're starting to see it affected sometimes in hysterical ways and sometimes in very serious ways.
I love the fact that you pointed out that these people weren't affected by the 2008 housing crisis, which is very true. I mean, the bubble really hasn't burst before. But I think there's two tracks here, I suppose, of fear on their part. I mean, one is the fact that they disagree with Donald Trump and think everyone he's putting into office is crazy and the enemy. And the other is the very simple one, which is I'm going to lose my job. What do you think is going to play out over the next year? I mean, do you think that the losing of jobs will continue? He's just going to slash a bunch of the jobs. I mean, is that the main fear everyone has? Because when you look at it, only a very small portion of government workers have either taken the buyout or left yet. Is it a fear of that happening, and how much of it is just a disgust with what's happened, to their beloved government?
The message boards, the email listservs, which I was made privy to, show a real disgust with the president. I mean, people think. Remember, in 2020, when COVID was going on, these people really compared themselves to the French Resistance. They cosplayed the entire time as if they were fighting Nazis. Granted, they were the ones who were wearing black masks and attacking political opponents in the streets. They were the ones who were calling the police on priests who were holding services to have them arrested for endangering public health. There's not a lot of self-awareness in this whole crew of people. And they really consider themselves part of the resistance. Now, some of that's faded, but you still see it with neighborhood moms listservs, Lululemon moms listservs, asking who's got a USAID flag that I can fly in front of my house next to my Ukrainian flag, next to my rainbow flag, next to my DC flag, to show how moral and how morally superior I am. Kind of like the modern liberal equivalent of putting lamb's blood above your door so the angel of judgment passes by you. And this whole crew is part of that, and they want to stay and fight. They're saying this is the resistance. You can't let fascism win. Fascism, I guess, is making you come to the office, or saying your services are no longer required for this particular position you've been paid for and haven't gone to for years. But at the same time, there's a lot of other people who are saying, well, this is a risk. And 8 months unemployment is a phenomenal offer, 8 months at full pay. But when your industry and your skill set has been devastated, 8 months goes by real quick. If you're near retirement, take it. If you're a young person who's got nothing to pay for except for his beer budget and his bills, maybe that's not a problem. But if you've got 2 kids in private school, if you're paying for college tuition, if you've got this mortgage that's hanging over your head, there's definitely a lot of calculations that have to be going into that, and I'll be interested. They've been carefully launching these lawsuits at the last minute to try and hold them up, to get emergency judgments. This is about to happen any day now. It was announced weeks ago, but they don't launch the lawsuit until 48 hours before a decision comes down. That's an intelligent tactic. But come Monday, I don't see how a federal judge could find it actually unconstitutional for the president to offer buyouts to employees of the president. I think the president's going to win on that one. He may lose some other battles, but that one he's pretty solid on. I expect you'll see a flood of resignations in those last hours.
Well, Chris, earlier this week, we were talking about Kash Patel going through, and he hasn't even been confirmed as the FBI director. And yet there are already all of these changes that we're seeing with the FBI. Well, last night we see Russ Vought get confirmed by the Senate. Now, Doge is working hand in hand with the Office of Management and Budget. Now, I ask you this because there's a leader in place now at a very important position right? And we know that the Democrats, they opposed him this time around. Russ Vogt, he was so effective, though, the first time. So how should they be concerned now if you're a Democrat and you're listening to everything that you've just laid out about what's happening in Washington, D.C. right now? What do you think is going to be the future now that they actually have their leader in place in Russ Vogt?
Oh, well, this is a hard place for Democrats to be in. I've got a piece coming out on the Beltway Brief on Monday about this, because they're stuck trying to generate and gin up opposition to an organization that most Americans have never heard of. They haven't been able to pick their fights at all. They're trying to make a villain out of Russ Vogt, who doesn't really look or fit the mold of a villain, and most Americans have never heard of and will probably have forgotten his name already. And at the end of the day, he's incredibly powerful. He is incredibly influential. And of all of the veterans of 2017's administration, him, Stephen Miller, a few others, are among the most effective. One of the people who are extremely intelligent, who have made a living understanding and absolutely nerding out over every aspect of federal government, who is completely committed to the MAGA agenda and trying to make sweeping changes. This is his life's mission. And he now has this opportunity in a way, and kind of he's unchained in a way that he never was he's never been in this position with the president's backing, with the doge backing, with things that are going on. He's going to be someone who Democrats are going to try and make a huge villain of. I don't think it's going to sway any voters. You might see some hardcore left-wing activists who already hate him continue to hate him. They'll try to make his life miserable. But at the end of the day, he's feeling pretty happy right now. He's giving thanks to God. He's tweeting that out. And he's going to get to work, and he will have a serious impact on exactly what we're talking about, which is the future of this federal government. I mean, I think we're kind of undergoing a Cold War, a cold-style revolution in D.C., and that's happened before, so don't get too panicked over it. The government that George Washington set up was probably not recognizable to someone who lived 10 years after Abraham Lincoln, and the same thing goes for 10 years after the Progressives or 10 years into the Cold War. Our government has changed pretty dramatically. We try to keep some semblance of the republic intact with the way we elect people. Even that has changed. And this seems like the beginning of the end of that post-Cold War coalition between the progressives in government, the big government people, and the blob defense industrial complex that have kind of came together in the 90s, 2000s, 2010s, governed everything, wanted everything to go their way, continued to spend how they wanted to, continued to spread their kind of crazy ideas. And it's over now. I think it's just the beginning of this, and it could be undone. But people like Elon and now people like Russ coming into power, they are important generals to have on the field.
Amen to all that. I think that is exactly right. What we need to know, though, about this guy coming in, our buddy Russ here, is going to be essential for him. He's not the bad guy. They stayed up all night to filibuster or whatever. They're willing to do whatever silly things, and they failed. But the bad guy right now is still Musk. And what's very interesting to me is if you got a guy like Russ Vogt in there who's tan, rested, and ready, is smart, knows what to do, and he pals with Musk a little bit, what do we know anything about that relationship? Because that would be incredibly interesting.
Musk is a constant presence around the old executive office building, which is where Russ's office is. I remember the first time I came into Russ's office in 2018 or so, it was sparsely decorated except for a single portrait of Calvin Coolidge, who's someone whose governing philosophy I think he shares. And I started there and I said, that's a wonderful portrait of Coolidge. And he seemed surprised that I recognized that. It was like a little secret thing that he had in his office that wasn't noticed by a lot. And Elon Musk is a constant presence in there. He moved his office. He's got an office in the old Secretary of War's room, and he has a lot of his team just around the corner in a more modern-looking building, not a government-looking building. But he liked the old office meeting room for the Secretary of War, and they've been setting up camp there. So they're going to be in the same building. They're going to be passing in the hallways. And I've got friends at the top of the White House now who are saying, I don't know if it's a good or a bad thing, but Elon Musk knows my name, knows where my office is. Yep. He checks in all the time. I text these guys and say, you want to come over for dinner? And they say, maybe if dinner is served at 11 p.m. on Sunday, because right now I'm at the office and I won't be leaving. They're working around the clock, and they will be working closely together.
I love it. That's what you want to see, though. Government efficiency and actually people that are working on our behalf. I don't even understand. It's so weird to even be having this conversation. But have a good weekend, Bedford. Great seeing you.
I'll see you Monday.
All right. Well, who do you think is going to win the big game? We'll have your answers next. Well, it's a big weekend because it's the big game. I don't know how Matthew Peterson is going to feel about us talking about it because his Bills are not going to be in it. But I still took to X this morning and asked what everybody thinks. Who do you think is going to win the big game? And it was very close. The Kansas City Chiefs edged them out for the Philadelphia Eagles just barely, but very close poll results there, MP.
Oh, yeah. I think, there's a lot of feels in this one. A lot of people just want the Eagles to win, and I saw many witty tweets about this, about how either what's never been done before, right, KC wins and gets the three-peat, or the Eagles win and people like them, which has also never happened before. So we'll see. I don't have a prediction on principle.
Well, let's get to some of the answers. Hammer replied, whoever the commissioner decides will bring in the most money in the future. Games are no longer decided by just the players on the field, but rather by who can make the league the most money in the future. WWE wrestling all over again.
Okay, well, if you're a script, NFL script conspiracy theorist, we all know how it ends, and we all know the engagement ring that we'll all see at that final moment when they finally get engaged.
Listen, that's not going to happen. I'm telling you that part right now. The three-peat is more likely than an engagement. Karen Del Marmal replied, at Stu Does America says ELGLES, Eagles. Stu has that on the sweater. He bought it. That was such a good moment. I enjoy that.
You can't
so
not
much.
Respect Stu's love of the Eagles.
Yeah.
I very much respect his fan behavior. It's
yes. Cool. And then Paul Cannon wrote, you missed the third choice. Does anyone care?
Paul, I love you, buddy.
I was going to say,
you're a good man.
This one is specifically for people
Eagles, Chiefs,
like Matthew Peterson right now.
Who cares? I don't care. No Bills.
It's going to be good food. It's going to be fun. It's going to be a good football game. And it's the last one that we have for months. So enjoy it. And the other thing that we're enjoying right now is the fact that people come out and they try and cancel you. And you know what? It's just not working the same way that it used to. It doesn't have that same punch anymore.
Yeah, so this is really important to understand. I mean, in the past, this is the revolution, what I'm about to say. This is a very key point. Because in the past, for decades, Republicans have just cowed and bowed to the mob whenever anyone on their side was caught saying something stupid when they were young, and especially if it had to do with race. And so, kids on the internet say dumb things. Your kids might say dumb things one day. My kids might say dumb things. We might have said dumb things when we were teenagers, or made mistakes, right? And this cancel culture doesn't allow anyone to make mistakes. It doesn't allow for forgiveness. And only one side was able to use it well, and that was the left. And over again, what did they do? They would find anything remotely. Like you went to a conference and there was someone there who's a bad guy, and therefore you're tainted, and therefore you have to leave the White House. This happened over and over and over again. And one of the best things about this second American Revolution is that people like J.D. Vance and Trump are standing up and saying, no, we're just not playing that game anymore. I don't care, Margaret, to all that noise. A lot of people on the right who are younger have understood this for a while. They've understood that this emotional blackmail, this sort of moral blackmail, needed to stop, and the right needed to stop falling for it every time. It doesn't mean you accept, bad things that people say, but it means you don't throw people under the bus just because when they were 24 years old, they said something stupid on the internet and some lefty journalist is trying to cancel them with it. They have no power if we just stop canceling ourselves and our own people. And that is what happened today within really the space of hours. A journalist who was paid by USAID, by the way, in the past, who's been out there trying to cancel many people, found out that some of the Zen-addled young Zoomers, that the geniuses that Elon brought in, had said some stupid things on the internet and retweeted some dumb stuff, and they wanted his head. And initially it looked like, oh yeah, he's going to have to be fired and we'll move on. And then Elon went on and said, should I do this? J.D. Vance went on and said, no, we shouldn't do this. And they brought him back. And Elon and J.D. Vance were very articulate in their replies. What the vice president said in response to Ro Khanna, the congressman who's, smart guy, Silicon Valley, who said to J.D. Vance, wouldn't you, for the sake of our kids, presumably because they're of full white race, right? Because of our kids, as if they'll be attacked racially on the internet, wouldn't you want to cancel this other kid? And J.D. Vance said, I'm sick of emotional blackmail. I'm not afraid of racist trolls on the internet. I'm afraid of a culture without grace, without forgiveness, and that just cancels people for life for stupid reasons. And that was a good reply. And that's the kind of reply that we need going forward. Enough of this scared, terrified of the other side, bowing down to cancel culture. People make mistakes. People say dumb things. And that doesn't mean that we throw them under the bus because some raving mad lefty journalist wants us to. That ship has sailed. That tactic is over. And I don't think it's going to work anymore.
J.D. Vance has such a way of speaking to everyday Americans that is both highly intelligent and completely conversational and approachable at the same time, where he can just cut through an issue and you go, oh yeah, you know what? That sounds right. That is what we should be doing.
Yeah, I mean, his line was, racist trolls on the internet, while offensive, don't threaten my kids. You know what does? A culture that denies grace to people who make mistakes. A culture that encourages congressmen to act like whiny children and to want to, cancel people because of some comment they made. We have to get beyond this. We have to get beyond this. And we are. And that's happening in real time. And once you do that, these people don't have power over you any longer.
Well, don't worry. The NFL has already ended racism. It's not going to be in the end zone for the big game this weekend. They're going to replace that with Choose Love. It's going to be the first time since End Racism isn't going to be there painted in the end zone since 2021 for the big game.
So you have to wonder, does this mean that they just gave up and they said, well, we can't really end racism, or did they end racism? I don't know.
I think that we should take the huge win. If we're stacking wins the way that we are right now, why not just go ahead and say, look at this. Look at what Donald Trump was able to do. He also ended racism.
You know how many racists there were who were watching the NFL and they saw that sign? They're like, you know what? I'm going to stop because the NFL just told me to end racism.
Yeah, now they're going to choose love instead.
That's why all the wokeness is dying. All the woke people were watching NFL and they saw end racism. They thought we shouldn't do this anymore. So choose love. Hey, choose love is great too. I mean, but these platitudes always crack me up. They don't really mean very much in the end, but sure, choose love. Yeah, listen, love is good.
Congratulations to your guy, Josh Allen.
Choose God.
NFL MVP. He didn't make it to the big game, but he did win a pretty decent award.
Fully deserved, Josh Allen, the MVP award. It's a bittersweet triumph because Josh knows only one award matters, but it did matter. It was good. It was just.
Enjoy the game, everybody. We'll see you back here on Monday. All the winning.